unwelcome. Don't listen to him. You are done with your mission. You don't have to return to Konya. Remember what Baba Zaman told you. It's way too dangerous. If you go back to that town you will never come out again. I wanted to keep traveling the world, meet new people and see new cities. I had liked Damascus, too, and could easily stay there until the next winter. Traveling to a new place often engendered a dreadful sense of loneliness and sadness in the soul of a man. But with God by my side, I was content and fulfilled in my solitude. Yet I knew too well that my heart was in Konya. I missed Rumi so much that it was too painful even to utter his name. At the end of the day, what difference would it make which city I stayed in, as long as Rumi was not beside me wherever he lived, there was my Qiblat. I moved my king on the chessboard. Francis's eyes flew open as he detected the fatal position. But in chess, just as in life, there were moves that you made for the sake of winning and there were moves you made because they were the right thing to do. Please come with me, implored Sultan Walid, interrupting my thoughts. The people who gossiped about you and treated you badly are remorseful. Everything will be better this time, I promise. My boy, you can't make such promises, I wanted to tell him. Nobody can, but instead I nodded and said, I would like to watch the sunset in Damascus one more time. Tomorrow we can leave for Konya. Really thank you. Sultan Walid beamed with relief. You don't know how much this will mean to my father. I then turned to Francis, who was patiently waiting for me to return to the game. When he had my full attention, an impish smile crept along his mouth. Watch out, my friend, he said, his voice triumphant. Checkmate. Kaimaya. Konya, May 1247. Bearing a mysterious gaze in his eyes and a distance in his demeanor that he never had before, Shams of Tabriz came back into my life. He seems to have changed a lot. His hair long enough to fall into his eyes, his skin tanned under the Damascus sun, he looks younger and more handsome. But there is something else in him, a change I cannot quite put my finger on. As bright and reckless as ever his black eyes might be, there is now a new glimmer to them. I can't help suspecting he has the eyes of a man who has seen it all and doesn't want to struggle anymore. But I think a deeper transformation has been taking place in Rumi. I had thought all his worries would diminish when Shams came back, but that doesn't seem to be the case. On the day Shams returned, Rumi greeted him outside the city walls with flowers. But when the joy of the first days somewhat abated, Rumi became even more anxious and withdrawn than before. I think I know the reason. Having lost Shams once, he is afraid of losing him again. I can understand as no one else can, because I, too, am afraid of losing him. The only person I share my feelings with is Gafur, Rumi's late wife. Well, she is not technically a person, but I don't call her a ghost either. Less dreamy and distant than most of the ghosts I have known, she has been moving like a slow flow of water around me ever since I came to this house. Although we converse about everything, lately there is only one topic between us, Shams. Rumi looks so distressed. I wish I could help him, I said to Gafur today. Perhaps you could. There is something occupying his mind these days, but he hasn't shared it with anyone yet, Gafur said mysteriously. What is it? I inquired. Rumi thinks if Shams gets married and starts a family, the townspeople would be less set against him. There would be less gossip, and Shams would not have to leave again. My heart skipped a beat. Shams getting married. But to whom Gafur gave me a sidelong look and said, Rumi has been wondering if you would like to marry Shams. I was stunned. Not that this was the first time the thought of marriage had crossed my mind. Now 15, I knew I had reached the age to marry, but I also knew that girls who got married changed forever. A new gaze came to their eyes, and they took on a new demeanor, to such an extent that people started to treat them differently. Even little children could tell the difference between a married woman and an unmarried one. Kafir smiled tenderly and held my hand. She had noticed that it was the getting married part that worried me, not getting married to Shams. The next day, in the afternoon, I went to see Rumi and found him immersed in a book titled Tahafut al-Tahafut. "Tell me, Kaimaya," he said lovingly, "what can I do for you? When my father brought me to you, you had told him that a girl would not make as good a student as a boy because she would have to marry and raise her children. Do you remember that?" "Of course, I remember," he answered, his hazel eyes filled with curiosity. "That day I promised myself never to get married, so that I could remain your student forever," I said, my voice dwindling under the weight of what I was planning to say next. "But perhaps it is possible to get married and not have to leave this house." "I mean, if I get married to someone who lives here." "Are you telling me you want to marry Aladdin?" Rumi asked. "Aladdin?" I repeated in shock. But what made him think I wanted to marry Aladdin? He was like a brother to me. Rumi must have detected my surprise. "Some time ago Aladdin came to me and asked for your hand," he said. I gasped. I knew it wasn't proper for a girl to ask too many questions on such matters, but I was dying to learn more. "And what did you say, master?" "I told him I would have to ask you first," Rumi said. "Master," I said, my voice trailing off. "I came here to tell you I want to marry Shams of Tabriz." Rumi gave me a look that bordered on disbelief. "Are you sure about this?" "It could be good in many ways," I said, as inside me the need to say more wrestled with the regret of having said too much. Shams would be part of our family, and he wouldn't ever have to leave again. "So is that why you want to marry him, to help him stay here?" asked Rumi. "No," I said. "I mean, yes, but that's not all. I believe Shams is my destiny." This was as close as I could get to confessing to anyone that I loved Shams of Tabriz. The first to hear about the marriage was Kara. In stunned silence she greeted the news with a broken smile, but as soon as we were alone in the house, she started to ask me questions. "Are you sure this is what you want to do? You are not doing this to help Rumi, are you?" she said. "You are so young. Don't you think you should marry someone closer to your own age?" "Shams says in love all boundaries are blurred," I told her. Kara sighed loudly. "My child, I wish things were that simple," she remarked, tucking a lock of grey hair into her scarf. "Shams is a wandering dervish, an unruly man. Men like him aren't used to domestic life, and they don't make good husbands." "That's all right, he can change," I concluded firmly. "I will give him so much love and happiness he will have to change. He will learn how to be a good husband and a good father." That was the end of our talk. Whatever it was that she saw on my face, Kara had no more objections to raise. I slept peacefully that night, feeling exultant and determined. Little did I know that I was making the most common and the most painful mistake women have made all throughout the ages, to naively think that with their love they can change the men they love. Kara. Konya, May 1247. Broaching a subject as deep and delicate as love is like trying to capture a gusty wind. You can feel the harm the wind is about to cause, but there is no way to slow it down. After a while I didn't ask Kaimaya any other questions, not because I was convinced by her answers but because I saw in her eyes a woman in love. I stopped questioning this marriage, accepting it as one of those odd things in life I had no control over. The month of Ramadan went by so fast and busy, I didn't have time to dwell on this matter again. Eid fell on Sunday. 4 days later we married Kaimaya to Shams. The evening before the wedding, something happened that changed my entire mood. I was alone in the kitchen, sitting in front of a floured board and a rolling pin, preparing flatbread for the guests. All of a sudden, without thinking what I was doing, I started molding a shape out of a ball of dough. I sculpted a small, soft Mother Mary. My Mother Mary. With the help of a knife, I carved her long robe and her face, calm and compassionate. So absorbed was I in this that I didn't notice someone standing behind me. "What is it that you are making, Kara?" My heart jumped inside my chest. When I turned around, I saw Shams standing by the door, watching me with inquisitive eyes. It occurred to me to hide the dough, but it was too late. Shams approached the tray and looked at the figure. "Is that Mary?" he asked, and when I didn't answer, he turned to me with a beaming countenance. "Why, she is beautiful. Do you miss Mary?" "I converted long ago. I am a Muslim woman," I answered curtly. But Shams continued to talk as if he hadn't heard me. "Perhaps you wonder why Islam doesn't have a female figure like Mary. There is Aisha, for sure, and certainly Fatima, but you might think it is not the same." I felt uneasy, not knowing what to say. "May I tell you a story?" Shams asked. And this is what he told me. Once there were 4 travelers, a Greek, an Arab, a Persian, and a Turk. Upon reaching a small town, they decided to get something to eat. As they had limited money, they had only one choice to make. Each said he had the best food in the world in mind. When asked what that was, the Persian answered angoor, the Greek said staphyllion, the Arab asked for anab, and the Turk demanded uzum. Unable to understand one another's language, they began to argue. They kept quarreling among themselves, feeling more resentful and bitter with every passing minute, until a Sufi who happened to pass by interrupted them. With the money collected, the Sufi bought a bunch of grapes. He then put the grapes in a container and pressed hard. He made the travelers drink the juice and threw away the skin, because what mattered was the essence of the fruit, not its outer form. Christians, Jews, and Muslims are like those travelers. While they quarrel about the outer form, the Sufi is after the essence, Shams said, giving me a smile that conveyed such excitement that it was hard not to be carried away by it. "What I am trying to say is, there is no reason for you to miss Mother Mary, because you don't need to abandon her in the first place. As a Muslim woman, you can still feel attached to her." I don't think that would be right," I stammered. "I don't see why not. Religions are like rivers, they all flow to the same sea. Mother Mary stands for compassion, mercy, affection, and unconditional love. She is both personal and universal. As a Muslim woman, you can keep liking her and even name your daughter Mary." "I don't have a daughter," I said. "You will have one." "You think so?" "I know so." I felt excited to hear such words, but before long the excitement was washed away by another feeling, solidarity. Sharing an unusual moment of serenity and harmony, we looked at the figure of Mother Mary together. My heart warmed to Shams, and for the first time since he'd come to our house, I was able to see what Rumi saw in him, a man with a big heart. Still, I doubted he would make a good husband for Kaimaya. Ella. B. Austin, June 29, 2008. By the time Ella got to the hotel, she was so tense she couldn't think properly. There was a group of Japanese tourists in the lobby, all of whom appeared to be in their 70s and sported the same haircut. She crossed the lobby, scanning the paintings on the walls, so as not to have to look in the eyes of the people around her. But it didn't take long for her curiosity to defeat her timidity. And the moment her gaze slid toward the meeting area, she saw him, watching her. He was wearing a khaki button-down shirt and dark corduroy trousers, and had a 2-day stubble that she thought made him quite attractive. His curly chestnut hair fell over his green eyes, giving him an air of confidence and mischief all at once. Wiry and thin, light and lithe, he was very different from David in his expensive tailor-made suits. He spoke with a Scottish brogue, which she found charming, and smiled with an ease of manner, looking genuinely happy and excited to see her. And Ella couldn't help asking herself what harm there could be in having a cup of coffee with him. Later on, she would not be able to remember how one cup of coffee became several cups, or how the conversation took on an increasingly intimate tone, or how at some point he planted a kiss on her fingertip, just as she would not be able to explain why she didn't do anything to stop him. After a while nothing seemed to matter as long as he kept talking and she could let her gaze linger on the small dimple at the corner of his mouth, wondering what it would be like to kiss him there. It was 11:30 in the evening. She was in a hotel with a man she didn't know anything about, aside from some emails and phone calls and the novel he'd written. "So you're here for Smithsonian Magazine?" Ella asked. "Actually, I'm here for you," Aziz answered. "After reading your letter, I wanted to come and see you." Still, there were possible exit routes off this fast-moving highway. Up to a certain moment, it remained possible to pretend that everything was just on friendly terms: the emails, the phone calls, even the glances. A bit flirtatious and playful, perhaps, but nothing more than that. She could have drawn a line. That is, until he asked, "Ella, would you like to come to my room?" If this was a game they were both playing, that was when it got serious. His question made everything far too real, as if a mantle had been lifted and the truth, the naked truth that had been there all along, now looked them squarely in the face. Ella felt something stir in her stomach, a bubbling discomfort that she recognized as panic, but she did not turn him down. This was the most impulsive decision she had made in her life, and yet at the same time it felt as if the decision had already been made for her. All she needed to do was to accept it. Room 608 was pleasantly decorated in hues of black, red, grey, and beige. It was warm and spacious. She tried to remember the last time she stayed in a hotel. A trip to Montreal with her husband and children a long time ago popped into her mind. After that, they had spent all their vacations at their house in Rhode Island, and she had no reason to stay in a place where the towels were changed daily and breakfast was prepared by others. Being in a hotel room felt like being in a different country. And perhaps she was. Already she could feel the frivolous freedom one could enjoy only in a city where everyone was a complete stranger. But as soon as she walked into the room, her nervousness came back. No matter how tasteful the decor or how spacious the room, the king-size bed was clearly at its center. Standing next to it made her feel awkward and guilty. She started struggling with internal questions, getting nowhere. Would they make love now? Should they? If they did, how could she look her husband in the eye afterward? But David never had any difficulty looking her in the eye despite his many flings, did he? And what would Aziz think of her body? What if he didn't like it? Shouldn't she be thinking about her children now? Were they asleep or awake watching TV at this hour? If they learned what she was about to do, would they ever forgive her? Sensing her unease, Aziz held her hand and moved her toward an armchair in the corner, away from the bed. "Hush," he whispered. "It's so crowded inside your mind. Too many voices." "I wish we had met earlier," Ella heard herself say. "There is no such thing as early or late in life," Aziz said. "Everything happens at the right time." "Do you really believe that?" He smiled and brushed a cloud of hair out of his eyes. Then he opened a suitcase and brought out the tapestry he'd bought in Guatemala and a small box that turned out to be a necklace of turquoise and red coral balls with a silver whirling dervish. Ella let him put the necklace around her neck. Where his fingers touched her skin, she felt warm. Can you love me? She asked. I already love you. Aziz smiled. But you don't even know me. I don't have to know to love. Ella sighed. This is crazy. Aziz reached around and pulled out the pin holding her bun, letting her hair loose. Then he gently moved her onto the bed. Slowly, tenderly, and in ever-growing circles, he moved his palms up from her feet toward her ankles and from there toward her belly. All the while his lips muttered words that sounded like a secret ancient code to Ella. Suddenly she understood. He was praying. While his hands caressed every inch of her body, his eyes remained firmly closed and his lips prayed for her. It was the most spiritual thing she had ever experienced. And although she kept her clothes on, and so did he, and although there was nothing carnal about it, it was the sexiest feeling she had ever experienced. All at once her palms, her elbows, her shoulders, her whole body began to tingle with a strange energy. She was possessed by so magnificent a desire that she felt as though she were floating on warm, wavy waters where all she could do was surrender and smile. She sensed a living presence around him, then around her, as if they were both being showered in a drizzle of light. She, too, closed her eyes now, drifting in a wild river without holding on to anything. There might be a waterfall at the end for all she knew, but even if she could have stopped, she wasn't sure she wanted to. Ella felt a burning between her legs when his hands reached her belly, drawing a circle there. She felt insecure about her body, her hips and thighs and the shape of her breasts, which were far from perfect after 3 kids and all these years, but the anxiety came and went. Feeling buoyant, almost protected, she snapped into a state of bliss. And just like that, she realized she could love this man. She could love him so much. With that feeling she put her arms around Aziz, pulling him toward her, ready to go further. But he snapped his eyes open, kissed her on the tip of her nose, and pulled away. You don't want me? Ella asked, amazed by the fragility of her voice. I don't want to do anything that would make you unhappy afterward. Half of her felt like crying, the other half was elated. A strange feeling of lightness took hold of her. She was entirely confused, but, to her great surprise, for once it felt okay to be confused. At 1:30 in the morning, Ella opened the door to her apartment in Boston. She lay on the leather couch, unwilling to sleep in the master bed. Not because she knew that her husband had been sleeping there with other women, but because somehow it felt better like this, as if this house didn't belong to her any more than a hotel room, as if she were a guest here and her true self were waiting elsewhere. Shams. Konya, May 1247. Beautiful bride, don't you cry. Say bye to your mom, bye to dad. You will hear the birds sing tomorrow. Though it will never be the same. On our wedding night, I slipped out into the courtyard and sat there for a while, listening to an old Anatolian song pour from the house amid the many other sounds. Laughter, music, gossip. Female musicians played in the women's section. I stood there thinking and chanting, shivering and feeling numb, all at the same time. I pondered the lyrics of the song. Why was it that women always sang sad songs on wedding nights? Sufis associated death with weddings and celebrated the day they died as their union with God. Women, too, associated weddings with death, though for entirely different reasons. Even when they were happily getting married, a wave of sadness descended upon them. In every wedding celebration, there was mourning for the virgin who was soon to become a wife and a mother. After the guests left, I returned to the house and meditated in a quiet corner. Then I went to the room where Kaimaya was waiting for me. I found her sitting on the bed, wearing a white robe adorned with golden threads, her hair braided into a multitude of plaits, each of which was ornamented with beads. It was impossible to see her expression, as her face was covered with thick, red tulle. Except for a candle that flickered by the window, the room was without light. The mirror on the wall had been covered by a velvet cloth, as it was deemed to be bad luck for a young bride to see her reflection on her wedding night. Beside our bed there was a pomegranate and a knife, so that we could eat the fruit and have as many children as the seeds inside. Kara had told me all about the local customs, reminding me to give the bride a necklace with gold coins upon opening her veil. But I never had gold coins in my life and did not want to greet my bride with coins borrowed from someone else. So when I lifted Kaimaya's veil, all I did was to give her a comb made of tortoiseshell and plant a small kiss on her lips. She smiled. And for a second I felt as shy as a lost little boy. "You are beautiful," I said. She blushed. But then she squared her shoulders, doing her best to look more tranquil and mature than she could ever be. "I am your wife now," she said. Then she pointed toward the beautiful carpet on the floor, which she had crafted on her own and with great care as part of her dowry. Exuberant colors, sharp contrasts. As soon as I saw it I knew that every knot and every pattern on the carpet was about me. Kaimaya had been weaving her dreams. I kissed her again. The warmth of her lips sent waves of desire across my entire body. She smelled of jasmine and wild flowers. Stretching out beside her, I inhaled her smell and touched her breasts, so small and firm. All I wanted was to enter her and get lost inside her. She offered herself to me the way a rosebud opens to the rain. I pulled away. "I'm sorry, Kaimaya. I can't do this." She looked at me, still and stunned, forgetting to breathe. The disappointment in her eyes was too much to bear. I jumped to my feet. "I need to go," I said. "You cannot go now," Kaimaya said in a voice that didn't sound like her. "What will people say if you leave the room now? They will know that this marriage was not consummated. And they'll think it was because of me." "What do you mean?" I murmured, half to myself, because I knew what she was suggesting. Averting her eyes, she mumbled something incomprehensible, and then she said quietly, "They'll think I wasn't a virgin. I'll have to live in shame." It made my blood boil that society imposed such ridiculous rules on its individuals. These codes of honor had less to do with the harmony God created than with the order human beings wanted to sustain. That's nonsense. People should mind their own business, I objected, but I knew that Kaimaya was right. With one quick move, I grabbed the knife beside the pomegranate. I glimpsed a trace of panic in Kaimaya's face, slowly replaced by the expression of someone who recognized a sad situation and accepted it. Without hesitation I cut my left palm. My blood dripped on our bed sheet, leaving dark crimson stains. "Just give them this sheet. This will shut their mouths, and your name will remain pure and clean, the way it should be." "Wait, please. Don't go," Kaimaya beseeched. She rose to her feet, but, not knowing what to do next, she repeated once again, "I am your wife now." In that moment I understood what a terrible mistake I had made by marrying her. My head throbbing with pain, I walked out of the room into the night. A man like me should never have gotten married. I wasn't designed to perform marital duties. I saw this clearly. What saddened me was the cost of this knowledge. I felt a strong need to run away from everything, not only from this house, this marriage, this town, but also from this body I had been given. Yet the thought of seeing Rumi the next morning held me anchored here. I couldn't abandon him again. I was trapped. Aladdin. Konya, May 1247. Being forced into a decision that I knew I would deeply regret later, I remained silent and did not openly object to this marriage. But on the day Kaimaya was going to be married to Shams, I woke up with a pain such as I had never felt before. I sat up in bed gasping for breath like a drowning man, and then, annoyed with myself for wallowing in self-pity, I slapped my face again and again. A strangled sigh escaped my lips. And it was that sound that made me realize I wasn't my father's son anymore. I had no mother. No father. No brother. And no Kaimaya. I was all alone in the world. What little remained of my respect for my father had disappeared overnight. Kaimaya was like a daughter to him. I thought he cared about her. But apparently the only person he really cared about was Shams of Tabriz. How could he marry Kaimaya to a man like him? Anyone could see that Shams would make a terrible husband. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became that just to make Shams safe, my father had sacrificed Kaimaya's happiness and along with it mine. I spent the whole day struggling with these thoughts while having to watch the preparations. The house was spruced up, and the bedroom where the newlyweds would sleep was cleansed with rose water to ward off evil spirits. But they forgot the biggest evil. How were they going to fend off Shams by late afternoon? I couldn't stand it anymore. Determined not to be part of a celebration that meant only torture for me, I headed for the door. Aladdin, wait! Where are you going? My brother's voice came from behind me, loud and sharp. I am going to stay at Irshad's house tonight, I said without looking at him. Have you gone crazy? How can you not stay for the wedding? If our father hears this, it will break his heart. I could feel rage rising from the pit of my stomach. How about the hearts our father is breaking? What are you talking about? Don't you get it? Our father arranged this marriage just to please Shams and make sure he doesn't run away again. He offered Kaimaya to him on a silver tray. My brother pursed his lips, looking hurt. I know what you are thinking, but you are wrong. You think this is a forced marriage, he said, whereas it was Kaimaya who wanted to marry Shams. As if she had a choice in the matter, I snapped. Oh, God! Don't you understand? My brother exclaimed, lifting both palms up as though asking help from God. She is in love with Shams. Don't say that again. That is not true. My voice cracked like thawing ice. My brother, Sultan Walid said, please don't let your feelings veil your eyes. You are jealous. But even jealousy can be used in a constructive way and serve a higher purpose. Even disbelief can be positive. It is one of the rules. Rule number 35, in this world, it is not similarities or regularities that take us a step forward, but blunt opposites. And all the opposites in the universe are present within each and every one of us. Therefore the believer needs to meet the unbeliever residing within. And the non-believer should get to know the silent faithful in him. Until the day one reaches the stage of Insani Kamil, the perfect human being, faith is a gradual process and one that necessitates its seeming opposite, disbelief. That was the last straw for me. Look here, I'm sick of all this syrupy Sufi talk. Besides, why should I listen to you? It's all your fault. You could have left Shams in Damascus. Why did you bring him back? If things get messy, and I am sure they will, you are the one who is responsible. My brother gnawed the insides of his mouth with a look that verged on fearfulness. I realized in that instant that for the first time in our lives he was frightened of me and the things I was capable of doing. It was a bizarre feeling, but strangely comforting. As I walked to Irshad's house, taking the side streets that reeked of foul smells so that nobody would see me cry, I could think of only one thing: Shams and Kaimaya sharing the same bed. The thought of him taking her wedding dress off and touching her milky skin with his rough, ugly hands was revolting. My stomach was tied in knots. I knew that a line had been crossed. Somebody had to do something. Kaimaya. Kanya, December 1247. Bride and groom, that is what we were supposed to be. It has been 7 months since we got married. All this time he hasn't slept with me as my husband even once. Hard as I try to hide the truth from people, I can't help suspecting they know it. Sometimes I fear that my shame is visible on my face. Like writing on my forehead, it is the first thing that anyone who looks at me notices. While I am talking to neighbors on the street, working in the orchards, or bartering with the vendors in the bazaar, it takes people, even strangers, only a glance to see that I am a married woman but still a virgin. Not that Shams never comes to my room. He does. Each time he wants to visit me in the evening, he asks me beforehand if it is all right. And each time I give the same answer. Of course it is, I say. You are my husband. Then all day long I wait for him with bated breath, hoping and praying that this time our marriage will be consummated. But when he finally knocks on my door, all he wants to do is sit and talk. He also enjoys reading together. We have read Layla and Majnun, Farhad and Shireen, Yusuf and Zulaikha, the Rose and the Nightingale, stories of lovers who have loved each other against all odds. Despite the strength and determination of their main characters, I find these stories depressing. Perhaps it is because deep inside I know that I will never taste love of such proportions. When not reading stories, Shams talks about the 40 rules of the itinerant mystics of Islam, the basic principles of the religion of love. Once he put his head on my lap as he was explaining a rule. He slowly closed his eyes, and as his voice trailed off into a whisper, he fell asleep. My fingers combed through his long hair, and my lips kissed his forehead. It seemed an eternity before he opened his eyes. Pulling me down toward himself, he kissed me softly. It was the most blissful moment we ever had together. But that was it. To this day his body is an unknown continent to me, as is my body to him. During these 7 months, I, too, have been to his room several times. But each time I visit him unannounced, my heart constricts with anxiety as I can never tell how he will receive me. It is impossible to predict Shams's moods. Sometimes he is so warm and loving that I forget all my sorrow, but then at other times he can be extremely grumpy. Once he slammed his door in my face, yelling that he wanted to be left alone. I have learned not to take any offense, just as I have learned not to bother him when he is in deep meditation. For months on end after the wedding, I pretended to be content, perhaps less with others than with myself. I forced myself to see Shams not as a husband but as almost everything else, a friend, a soul mate, a master, a companion, even a son. Depending on the day, depending on his mood, I thought of him as one or the other, dressing him up in a different costume in my imagination. And for a while it worked. Without expecting much, I began to look forward to our conversations. It pleased me immensely that he appreciated my thoughts and encouraged me to think more creatively. I learned so many things from him, and in time, I realized, I, too, could teach him a few things such as the joys of family life, which he had never tasted before. To this day I believe I can make him laugh as no one else could. But it wasn't enough. Whatever I did, I could not rid my mind of the thought that he didn't love me. I had no doubt that he liked me and meant me well. But this wasn't anything even close to love. So harrowing was this thought that it was eating me up inside, gnawing at my body and soul. I became detached from the people around me, friends and neighbors alike. I now preferred to stay in my room and talk with dead people. Unlike the living, the dead never judged. Other than the dead, the only friend I had was Desert Rose. United in a common need to stay out of society, we had become close friends. She is a Sufi now. She leads a solitary life, having left the brothel behind her. Once I told her I envied her courage and determination to start life anew. She shook her head and said, "But I have not started life anew. The only thing I did was to die before death. Today I went to see Desert Rose for an entirely different reason. I had planned to maintain my composure and talk to her calmly, but as soon as I entered, I started choking back sobs. "Kaimaya, are you all right?" she asked. "I am not feeling well," I confessed. "I think I need your help." "Certainly," she said. "What can I do for you?" "It is about Shams. He doesn't come near me." "I mean, not in that way," I stuttered halfway through but managed to finish my sentence. "I want to make myself attractive to him. I want you to teach me how." Desert Rose exhaled, almost a sigh. "I took an oath, Kaimaya," she said, a weary note slipping into her voice. "I promised God to stay clean and pure and not even think any more about the ways a woman could give pleasure to a man. But you are not going to break your oath. You are just going to help me," I pleaded. "I am the one who needs to learn how to make Shams happy." "Shams is an enlightened man," Desert Rose said, lowering her voice a notch, as if afraid of being heard. "I don't think this is the right way to approach him. But he is a man, isn't he?" I reasoned. "Aren't all men the sons of Adam and bound by the flesh? Enlightened or not, we all have been given a body. Even Shams has a body, doesn't he?" "Yes, but..." Desert Rose grabbed her tasbih and started to finger the beads one at a time, her head tilted in contemplation. "Oh, please," I begged. "You are the only one I can confide in. It has been 7 months. Every morning I wake up with the same heaviness in my chest, every night I go to sleep in tears. It can't go on like this. I need to seduce my husband." Desert Rose said nothing. I took off my scarf, grabbed her head, and forced her to look at me. I said, "Tell me the truth. Am I so ugly?" "Of course not, Kaimaya. You are a beautiful young woman." "Then help me, teach me the way to a man's heart," I insisted. "The way to a man's heart can sometimes take a woman far away from herself, my dear," Desert Rose said ominously. "I don't care," I said. "I am ready to go as far as it takes." Desert Rose. Kanya, December 1247. Bursting into tears, she kept begging me to help, her face swollen, her chest heaving harder and faster, until I finally told her I would lend a hand. Even as I comforted her, deep inside I knew it was hopeless. I knew I should never have yielded to her demands. Still, I wonder how could I not have seen this tragedy coming? Torn with guilt, I keep asking myself again and again, how could I have been so naive and not seen that things would take such a terrible turn? But the day she came to me crying for help, there was no way I could turn her down. "Teach me, please," she begged me, her hands demurely folded in her lap, like the good girl she was raised to be. Hers was a voice that no longer had a reason to hope yet was hopeful all the same. What harm could there be in this? I thought as my heart lurched in compassion. It was her husband she wanted to seduce, for God's sake. Not a stranger. She had only one motive, love. How could this lead to anything incorrect? Her passion might be too strong, but it was halal, wasn't it? A halal passion. Something inside me sensed a trap, but since it was God who set it, I saw no harm in walking right in. This is how I decided to help Kaimaya, this village girl whose only notion of beauty was applying henna to her hands. I taught her how to make herself more attractive and good-looking. She was an avid student, eager to learn. I showed her how to take long perfumed baths, soften her skin with scented oils and ointments, and apply masks of milk and honey. I gave her amber beads to braid in her hair so that her head would have a sweet, lasting smell. lavender, chamomile, rosemary, thyme, lily, marjoram, and olive oil. I told her how to apply each and which incenses to burn at night. Then I showed her how to whiten her teeth, paint her nails and toes with henna, apply kohl on her eyes and eyebrows, redden her lips and cheeks, how to make her hair look lush and silky and her breasts bigger and rounder. Together we went to a store in the bazaar I knew too well from the past. There we bought her silk robes and silk undergarments, the likes of which she had never seen or touched before. Then I taught her how to dance in front of a man, how to use this body God had given her. After 2 weeks of preparation, she was ready. That afternoon I prepared kaimaya for Shams of Tabriz, the way a shepherd prepares a sacrificial lamb. First she took a warm bath, scrubbing her skin with soapy cloths and anointing her hair with oils. Then I helped her to get dressed in clothes that a woman could wear only for her husband, and even for him only once or twice in a lifetime. I had chosen a cherry-colored sheath and a pink robe gilded with hyacinths, of the sort that would reveal the shape of her breasts. Lastly we applied lots and lots of paint on her face. With a string of pearls across her forehead added as a final touch, she looked so pretty that I couldn't take my eyes off her. When we were done, Kaimaya didn't look like an inexperienced, timid girl anymore, but a woman burning with love and passion. A woman ready to make a bold move for the man she loved and, if necessary, to pay a price. As I stood inspecting her, I remembered the verse of Joseph and Zulaikha in the Holy Quran. Just like Kaimaya, Zulaikha, too, had been consumed by a desire for a man who did not respond to her overtures. When the ladies in the city had maliciously gossiped about her, Zulaikha had invited them all to a banquet. She gave each of them a knife, and she said to Joseph, "Come out before them." When they saw him, they did extol him, and in their amazement cut their hands. They said, "God preserve yous! No mortal is this. This is none other than a noble angel." Who could blame Zulaikha for desiring Joseph so much? "How do I look?" Kaimaya asked anxiously before she put on her veil, ready to step out the door and onto the street. "You look exquisite," I said. "Your husband will not only make love to you tonight, he'll come back tomorrow asking for more." Kaimaya blushed so hard her cheeks turned rosy red. I laughed, and after a brief pause she joined me, her laughter warming me like sunshine. I meant what I said, as I felt confident that she would be able to attract Shams, the way a flower rich with nectar attracts a bee. And yet when our eyes met just before she opened the door, I saw that a trace of doubt had crept into her gaze. Suddenly I had a bad feeling in the pit of my stomach, almost a premonition that something terrible was going to happen. But I didn't stop her. I should have known better. I should have seen it coming. For as long as I live, I will never forgive myself.